After season 1 of Andor, the hallowed halls of YouTube were abuzz with praise. The show brought Star Wars back to its roots while also pushing it into the 21st century. They lauded the show for its depiction of a man's radicalization to fight against fascism. In fact, it was so impactful that 1 in 3 viewers spontaneously became experts in Karl Marx's Das Kapital. So, when season 2 of the show dropped, you can bet that my expectations were reasonable and my reaction measured. Nah, but it was kind of shit though. Currently, season 2 of Andor has a 97% positive rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So, how can I make such a damning statement when so many people clearly loved it? Are we meant to just accept that I am right and everyone else is wrong? And to that I would say, yes, thank you for understanding. No, but really, in this video, I'll not only detail my issues with the season, particularly its writing, but I'll also put my money where my mouth is and provide an outline of a much stronger version of the season. But first, let me just say that the visual design of the show is stunning. The world building is top notch, and the build up to an entire runtime of that one scene with Cyril, Dedra, and Cyril's mum is just a heap of fun. But for me, as a novelist, everything always comes back to the writing, especially the execution of its long-term story and character arcs. So, how did the writers do there? Oh, and spoiler warning. Well, I have a few main issues. Firstly, and most importantly, the setup isn't paid off, and the payoff isn't set up. It's like the show was farmed out to a bunch of different writers who wrote their episodes simultaneously, but in different soundproof rooms. Oh, would you look at that? Secondly, the characters just don't impact the plot. Things just seem to happen, and then something else happens, and then the third thing happens, and there's very little causal relationship between each event. And finally, a majority of the plot just inexplicably happens off screen. As characters spoke to each other, I'd regularly find myself saying things like, wait, when did you learn that the bombing was a false flag? Or, wait, when did Lonnie get access to Dedra's credentials? And, wait, what exactly is a scavenger? And when did Dedra become one? And it's fine to have some plot reveals occur in a conversation, but 1, these are some important plot points, and 2, they often weren't even presented as a reveal, but rather just both characters seeming to be well aware of something that the audience has never seen. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the broader plot. Let's talk about Gorman. Hang on, you might be saying. Isn't that like the middle of the season? But the thing about the first few episodes is, you see, they just don't matter. Even the people who liked season 2 seem to agree, and it's demonstrated in the episode's reviews. We have Cassian steal a fighter that never gets mentioned again. He gets caught up in rebel infighting, which is supposed to be thematically significant, but isn't consequential to the plot. And we have the whole illegal immigrant farmer subplot, which is fine, but for now, let's just pretend the majority of those episodes don't exist, like the writers should have. So, Gorman. What's the issue? Well, I have a few issues, but let's start intuitively with my second point from earlier. Our main characters, Cassian, Dedra, Cyril, even Luthen, have no real impact on the story. Now, you might be saying, what do you mean? Cassian, Luthen, Dedra, and Cyril all empower Rylans in the Gorman front, who are integral to the Imperial propaganda campaign, which ultimately leads to the Gorman genocide. And to that I would counter, if none of our protagonists had been to Gorman or done anything, literally nothing would have gone differently on that planet. Well, except of course, Cinta would have survived. Rest in peace, Cinta. I definitely didn't have to Google your name. Now, why do I say that? Well, let's think about it. What was the Gorman Front's plan again? Hang on, I know. Let's ask Cassian.
They have a plan. They want to hijack an Imperial transport to prove something that everybody already knows is true. Who's gonna care about it?
Oh, so the whole plan for the robbery just didn't actually achieve anything. Sorry, Cinta. Hey, but having the Gormans act against the Imperials was still ammunition for Imperial propaganda. But the thing is, we never see how our heroes' actions validate that propaganda. We even see repeatedly that the Imperials are more than willing to commit false flag attacks against themselves. This includes in the naval depot bombing and in the final trap in the Memorial Plaza. That's right, the final act of violence used to justify the entire massacre against the Gormans isn't even really committed by the Gormans. Now I know, this is supposed to be just another example of the Imperials being evil. But are we supposed to believe that, without the intervention of the rebels, the Gorman front, who was already plotting to violently resist the Empire, just wouldn't have shown up to even peacefully protest the Empire at the final confrontation? I say again, our heroes have no impact on the entire Gorman plot. But this is where we come back to my first point. The setup isn't paid off and the payoff isn't set up. A plot arc is characterized by 3 steps: promise, progress, and payoff. I actually really like a lot of the early promises of the Gorman plotline. There is real drama to be mined from what's set up in episodes 4 and 5. Having Cyril be used as a puppet of Dedra and the Empire to infiltrate the Gormans is a fantastic premise. The conflict between an idealistic Cassian and a ruthlessly pragmatic Luthen is great. Cassian wants to help shield the Gorman people from the dangers of rebellion, while Luthen wants to use their resistance as a beacon for the galaxy, even if it leads to their ultimate demise. That dichotomy is just brimming with potential. So what did the show do with these plotlines? Well, as far as Cassian and Luthen's conflict goes, Cassian heads to Gorman to meet with the rebels and learns their plan to steal Imperial cargo. Then, Cassian leaves, and he and Luthen debate on a ship whether having a planet of wealth and status rebel against the Empire is good for the cause when the people know nothing of fighting and will go up in flames. After they confront each other on their positions, Cassian returns to Coruscant, and that's it. He never gets directly involved with the Gorman front again. Instead of Cassian, Luthen sends Val to lead the resistance on Gorman, and no one comes into conflict with him over the danger to the Gormans. When Cassian does eventually return to Gorman, it's not to help the Gorman front, it's to assassinate Dedra because of what she did on Ferrix. And what does Cassian's presence there ultimately accomplish? He doesn't try shooting at Dedra and accidentally spark violence in the plaza. He doesn't do anything, except be another pair of eyes to witness events. The one thing he does do is steal an Imperial crowd suppressor droid and brings it back to the rebel base for some reason. And of course, he does get into a fight with Cyril, causing the man's ultimate death, but that's not from any of his actions. They just happen to bumble into each other in the crowd after literally not interacting or even thinking about each other for the entire season. And that brings us to the Cyril storyline. He infiltrates the Gorman front under the false premise of using the burgeoning Gorman resistance to capture wider rebellion forces. And there is so much narrative potential in that setup. Cyril needs to take on the persona of a disgruntled and mistreated Imperial bureaucrat, a cover with so much grounding in Cyril's real life that it could just as easily be true. And this creates physical distance between him and Dedra. It isolates him. After feeding information to the Gormans for their one cargo theft, we see him being proud of his accomplishments. Then, when he discovers that the naval depot bombing may not have been the Gormans, something that happens off-screen, he confronts Dedra. Then he tells on himself to the front, saying that they could try to pin the bombing on outside agitators. And this kind of hints at Cyril becoming his cover, which, if true, we never really see being progressed on the screen prior to this. And then, after learning about the mining ships that are landing on the planet, which again happens off-screen, he goes and he confronts Dedra again. But rather than dying to the Imperials and cementing how his hard work on their behalf would not save him from their brutality, he instead wanders out into the crowd and finally dies at Gorman hands as he attempts to fight Cassian. And again, They have not encountered each other or even mentioned each other even once all season prior to this fight. The show even highlights the lack of history between the two characters with a line that they use as the episode title. In the middle of the fight, Cassian stops to ask, "Who are you?" It's supposed to be one final gut punch of punishment to the man we're supposed to despise, but we have just seen him stand up to Dedra and the Empire in a moment of character growth. This could easily be him moments before completing a redemption arc, so having him confront Cassian is a sudden and undermotivated backslide. As is, the confrontation between the two just serves to highlight how lacking in substance Cyril's character arc really is. And that's not to say I think Cyril necessarily should have been redeemed, but just that the show clearly flirts with the idea before ultimately offering us non-committal in either direction. And in doing so, it just fails to pay off one of its main early promises. The last big issue I have with the Gorman storyline ties into the issue I have with the wider plot, which is too many important plot points happen off screen. The primary plotline of the whole season is that the Imperials are trying to build the Death Star, and Gorman is a big piece of the puzzle. The Empire wants the special minerals in the ground, calcite, and need to essentially destroy the entire planet, strip mining it for those resources. The rebels discover this via their agent in the ISB, Lonnie, who learns it off-screen after he gains access to Dedra's ISB credentials, which happens off-screen, and Dedra discovers it by scavenging intelligence while looking for Axis, aka Luthen, which happens, say it with me, off-screen. In the last 3 episodes, after the audience doesn't see any active work done that amounts to any gained knowledge, the characters just start to spontaneously know the Imperial plan and share it with each other. The final challenge of the series involves convincing Clea to trust the rebels at Yavin, and then the rebels at Yavin to trust Luthen and Clea's information, over an apparent history of distrust. This is despite the fact that we never see these two forces coming into opposition with each other. These are integral plot points which just simply aren't shown. But maybe these are cherry-picked examples. What do the writers spend their time on instead? Well, we watch Clea enter a party to remove a listening device from a rival antiquity enthusiast, who was not relevant to the wider plot and does not become relevant. We see Wilman learn how to harvest an addictive and dangerous fuel source and drug, which he chooses to indulge in, but this is swiftly never mentioned again. We get time dedicated to a fighter ship theft that never comes up. We get Cassian caught up between 2 groups of rebels who are never mentioned again. Here's a quick taste of a rewrite for you. Why not have the 2 rebel groups that are fighting over the fighter jet be Luthen's people and Yavin people, with conflicting destinations for the ship? We get a plot arc around an Imperial crackdown on illegal immigrants on the grain harvesting planet, which culminates in the attempted assault of Bix and the murder of her close friend Brasso. And this is only referenced at the very end of the story, when Bix apparently decides to return to the scene of so much of her trauma in order to raise her child? What? I mean, I know you wanted her in this shot with the grain to symbolize rebirth, but are we really going to just forget about what happened to her here? Why is there so much missing that's integral to the story while so much irrelevant filler remains? The writers were either incompetent or more likely not given enough time to work together to iterate on their drafts. Now, it's worth noting that the writers originally planned for this to be a 5-season show, so a lot of what we see was likely supposed to be spread across 4 seasons before being rewritten and condensed into one, which may very well have been done at the last minute. But while this may very well explain the issues with this season, I can't say that it excuses them. And so, if it feels like I'm being overly critical, I probably am, but I cannot overstate the severity of the show's missed opportunities. And to prove my point, if you'll forgive a novelist from being so presumptuous, let me see if I can give you an idea of what could have been. That is, assuming the studio gave the writers enough time to do something crazy, like, I don't know, write a second draft. Let's start with Gorman. So, given the whole season is structured around the secret horrible plan that the Imperials have for Gorman, in my version, I'm just going to go ahead and not tell the audience about it in the first episode. I'd even keep Dedra in the dark. Everything will work a lot better if only Partagaz and Krennic know about the plan for Kalkite. Dedra only knows that the Imperials are trying to incite the Gormans to violence, and Dedra thinks that what she tells Cyril is true, that the Imperials are just there to trap outside agitators. That way, as our heroes discover each new layer of deceit, the audience gets to be surprised, or maybe even validated if they guess it ahead of time. The next change I'd make would occur after Cassian meets the Gorman front and is speaking with Luthen off-planet. Their conversation would play out much as it does in the show. Cassian says the Gormans would die if they rebelled, and Luthen replies their success doesn't matter so long as their defiance is seen across the galaxy. But in my version, Cassian says, I can't help you with this. I won't lead these people to their death. And Luthen replies, you know how this works, Cassian. We do what needs to be done, no matter the cost. If you don't do this, well, I have friends everywhere. With this small change, we get to call back to their code exchange, but now as a threat. And Cassian learns that he can't just leave, because Luthen will send someone else to Gorman instead. So, Cassian decides to stay on Gorman and help the people. This helps lay the groundwork for that extra layer of conflict between Luthen and the rest of the rebels that we get to call back to in the final act. And call me crazy, but I feel like the protagonist of our story should be on the planet where it's taking place. Next change, Cyril. Now remember, our main concern is that his relationship with the Gorman front isn't explored enough on screen. So, in my version, Cyril doesn't meet with Carrow Rylands early on, but instead spends most of his time speaking with his contact at the Gorman front. In the show, this is Sam, the spider salesman from the courtyard. But in my version, it's going to be Enza Rylands, Carrow's daughter. The pair are going to gradually become closer, bonding over the shared weight of expectation placed upon them by their parents, and the opportunity that the rebellion gives them to break free of those expectations. Eventually, their relationship blossoms into a romance, and this would be one of the many ways that I would try to show the separation between Cyril and his cover story start to deteriorate. It gives us a tangible manifestation of Cyril's internal conflict, and that's between his growing affinity for the hard-working Gorman people and his desire for order and justice that he associates with the Empire and Dedra. Now, the cargo heist proper. Remember, a core problem with the show is that the characters' actions don't have enough impact on the plot. So, in the lead up to the heist, Cassian shares Luthen's standard procedure. New rebels are not provided weapons. It's too easy to trace them back to Luthen. And just like in the show, a Gorman, Sam, confronts Cassian about it. You'd have us hanging our necks out against the rebellion without the means to defend ourselves? This calls back to the conflict between Luthen and Cassian. So, feeling guilty, Cassian concedes and allows a few of the Gormans to be armed from his own arsenal. Next, the cargo heist plan is slightly different in my version. So, the Imperial cargo deliveries always come in groups of 3 or 4 trucks. Trying to rob the whole convoy is just too risky. So, Cyril has provided not only the manifest information of each of the trucks, but also their backup routes in the case that the passage becomes impassable. Thus, the Gormans will redirect their target truck by collapsing a crane across the road to isolate it from the rest of the convoy before they rob it. The Gormans' target truck is the 3rd truck in the 4th group. But as the show takes pains to establish, the Gorman front are new to the rebellion and extremely nervous on the night of the robbery. The Gorman in charge of collapsing the crane confuses his instructions. Instead, he redirects the 4th truck in the 3rd convoy. And while all this is happening, Cyril is watching from a balcony out of sight. He's desperately trying to spot anyone he doesn't know because he still thinks he's there to catch outside agitators. Below, Cassian fires an EMP device at the truck, bringing it to a halt, and Gormans rush into the street. After all, there's no danger to them. The manifest specifically says that the truck is unguarded. Dedra and Partagaz saw to that. Except, this isn't their target truck. There aren't supposed to be guards, one of the Gorman front shouts, and the Imperials start shooting. So now, Sam, who Cassian armed, ducks behind a fence and starts shooting blindly over cover to keep the Imperials from getting to his friends. This buys the other Gormans just enough time to get out of the way until Cassian swoops in and ends the fight with a few well-placed blaster shots. But in the process, Cyril sees him, and Cyril knows him. "It's Andor!" he exclaims over the radio to Dedra and Partagaz. "Send everything you have! It's him! I'm going down there!" But Partagaz gives a stern shake of his head to Dedra. "No," Dedra tells Cyril, "stick to the plan." "What do you mean?" Cyril says. "This is why we're here, to catch outside agitators. We've caught him." "Patience," Dedra says. "We'll bring him in, but not tonight." So Cyril grits his teeth, then sighs and backs down. Below, most of the Gormans are moving the cargo, but Sam is staring at the bodies of the Imperial troops, in shock. Sirens sound in the distance, getting closer. The Gormans are in danger. Cassian runs to grab Sam and drag him back to the group sending cargo down the tunnel. "We have to get out of here. Now." Cassian is about to leave, but he takes one last look back, and we see what Sam was actually looking at. When the young Gorman was firing his blaster, he didn't just help kill the Imperials. In all the commotion, no one else had noticed what had happened. An elderly woman lies dead in the street, thanks to them. But it's too late now. They have to go. Back in the Gorman Front HQ, they're unloading the cargo truck. Someone is talking about how the order number on the boxes doesn't match what Cyril gave them. They're realizing that their man redirected the wrong truck. But this truck also happens to be flagged with military clearance, which hides its manifest from Cyril and other auditors. It doesn't contain the weapons the Imperials wanted the Gormans to find, however. It contains industrial mining equipment, and that raises questions that none of them can answer. And after the heist, we repeatedly see Imperial propaganda about the violent rebels, and each time we do, we see images of an old woman lying dead in the mud. So with a few small changes, suddenly this heist provides actual new plot-relevant information to our protagonists. It creates conflict between Cyril and Dedra, it progresses the conflict between Cassian and Luthen, and it shows how the rebel interference, with Cassian providing weapons to the Gormans, is directly providing ammunition for the Imperial propaganda. Each plot point actually feeds into the next, and our characters' conflict drives the story forward. I dare you to tell me that isn't a huge improvement on the show. But if you're looking at the runtime of this video, you can probably tell I'm not done yet. So after the heist, Cyril confronts Dedra about being told to back down when he spotted Cassian. Rather than admit that Cyril isn't actually there to capture outside agitators, Dedra tells Cyril about Axis, aka Luthen, and how their best result would be to use Cassian to get information about Axis. While skeptical at first, this appeases Cyril for now, and it gives him something to do: find out more about who Cassian is working for. The Gormans, via Enza, ask Cyril to get information on the trucks marked with military security manifests. The plan is to start following them. Cyril asks to be allowed to the Gorman Front meetings, but they say no. He says he's sticking his neck out for these manifests and won't do it unless they allow him to attend. He says he's as much a part of this resistance as they are. And reluctantly, the Gormans agree. Cyril attends a meeting with Caro, but Cassian also keeps close, eavesdropping just in case things go bad. Cyril demands to know what they found in the military transport, and what they plan to do if he hands over more manifests. After all, the last time he helped, someone got shot. Caro says it's probably best that he doesn't know, and Cyril threatens to leave. He says they'll never see him again. And that makes Cassian step in. This brings Cyril face to face with the man he believes ruined his corporate life and is responsible for at least 2 cold-blooded murders. Cyril grits his teeth and does his best to stay professional. Cassian, however, is oblivious to all this and does his best to talk Cyril down from leaving and to convince him to cooperate. Cyril looks Cassian in the eye and says, "You don't have an accent. You're not from here. Why do you care?" And Cassian ignores Cyril's hypocrisy and says, "What's happening here is bigger than just Gorman." Cyril gives a slight, knowing smile and says, "I think you're right." Later, Cyril confronts Enza, saying that he met with Cassian and asks why they trust him if he isn't from Gorman. "How do you know he isn't an Imperial spy?" Cyril says without shame. He suggests that if Enza tells him where Cassian's staying, he can get information about the man and make sure that he's not a threat. Enza reluctantly agrees, and here we see their relationship becoming more comfortable and more serious. A held gaze, a knowing smile. They're falling for each other. Meanwhile, in the Senate, there's a bill up for debate that will see stormtroopers allowed to be deployed to Republic planets. The Imperials intend to use this new law to bolster their presence on Gorman, as they currently only have military security on the planet. Mon Mothma and Senator Organa are leading the resistance against the bill in the Senate, trying to marshal votes against it from as many planets as they can. At the same time, the Gormans are debating 2 competing plans to continue their rebellion. Val and Cinta have arrived on Gorman to provide support, having come from Luthen and Mon Mothma respectively. Members of the Gorman front have followed Imperial trucks and found a few locations the shipments are going. One is an abandoned spider silk hatchery in the mountains, and the other is a naval depot that the Gormans expect the Imperials are stockpiling weapons in. Luthen and Cinta want to attack the naval depot, but Val shares Mon Mothma's desire for the front to lie low so that she can shut down the legislation currently in the Senate without new violent rebel attacks fueling the growing authoritarian power grabs. This puts our 2 lovebirds, Cinta and Val, at odds with one another, and emphasises the division in the rebellion that's being caused by Luthen. The Gormans argue that the group is already facing Imperial security and military influence. The Imperials are breaking the law already, so why waste time fighting in the Senate? They initially agree with Luthen that they should attack the naval depot. But Cassian steps in between the 2 groups. He insists that the mines must be important if the shipments going there are marked with Imperial military manifests. Cassian suggests that they follow the trucks into the mountains and see what's going on down there. And he argues that this can be done without violence so that it doesn't get in the way of Mon's work. And with Caro's backing, the Gormans agree with Cassian's plan. However, despite the decision made by Caro and the rest of the Gorman front, Cinta goes behind their back and works with a small group of more militant Gormans. They plan to attack the naval depot anyway. We follow 3 heists simultaneously. Cassian into the mines, Cinta into the naval depot, and Cyril into Cassian's hotel. The viewers will expect something to go wrong, but with each raid in parallel, they'll have to guess where. Cassian follows the trucks into the catacombs until they reach a mine deep in the mountain that's heavily guarded. Meanwhile, Cinta and her Gorman militants infiltrate the naval depot armed with explosives. All the while, Cyril enters Cassian's hotel room armed with an Imperial bug-sweeping gadget. He finds Cassian's comm device hidden in the false compartment of a drawer, and he plants a bug on it. And we cut to Dedra and an ISB analyst listening in on Coruscant. The Gormans in the naval depot take out a single guard, but there seems to be too few people here for such a large facility. Cinta comments on this, but a Gorman replies that the Imperials are probably just too arrogant to think that anyone would even dare to defy them. Inside the mine, Cassian hacks a data point and steals a manifest from a truck leaving the mine. It contains calcite. Cinta and Luthen's plan is to place explosives on some refueling tanks and arms caches scattered throughout the depot. Cinta and her group split up, and we see some of the Gormans placing explosives. The music builds intensity. Then we see Cinta place a bomb on a large fuel tank, but then she hesitates. On the other side of the tank, she finds another, slightly different explosive. Did someone already do this tank? She asks. No, comes a reply over radio. Helder, Lawrence, she asks. Both reply, no. Then why is there... Cinta turns and sees a hidden security camera she'd missed, and it's aimed right at the fuel tank. Her eyes go wide. We have to get out. Now! Cinta runs, but it's too late. A series of explosions echo through the depot. We see Cinta thrown across the room, slamming into a wall. Sorry, Cinta. Then, more explosions. The whole building collapses in on itself in a fiery eruption, burying the Gormans inside, but not before having filmed them breaking in. And for those not following, essentially what happened is the Imperials framed the Gormans by greatly expanding the scope of the destruction that they were intending to cause and significantly increasing the collateral damage. And of course, we'll see Imperial propaganda featuring this explosion later. Cut to the Gorman HQ. Cassian and Rylance find out that Cinta went behind their backs and that she and the Gorman radicals who went with her are dead. They debate how this could have happened, and Val is adamant that there is no way Cinta could have been so careless as to die in that explosion. She suspects foul play. But putting that aside, the Gormans send the information about the Calcite mine off to Luthen. However, all their communication with him is one way. That's to say, they send encrypted messages to him, and he sends encrypted messages to Cassian or another entrusted rebel. But of course, now Cyril has a tap on Cassian's comms, and that means he receives a message containing a lot of information about Calcite and very little context. And he shares that message with Dedra. So Dedra asks Partagaz about it, saying that they have a lead on Axis. But Partagaz no longer cares about Axis. The priority is Gorman, he says. Besides, the rebels have far outgrown that 2-bit arms dealer by now. Dedra is stunned. This is Axis he's talking about, the centre to the whole rebellion in Dedra's eyes. But she composes herself just barely enough to nod and say, yes sir. Dedra speaks with an ISB agent and tells him to put a flag on all communications regarding Calcite. The analyst asks if the report results should be sent to Partagaz as well, and Dedra replies, the Major suspects that there could be some unwanted eyes on this, but it is of the utmost importance. Send it to my datapad. Keep the Major's name out of it. If it goes bad, I take the fall. Understand? The analyst nods. So, in my version, this is obviously how Dedra gets the Death Star plans. And with that, we have one of the most integral plot points in the show not only happen on screen, but as a direct result of a causal chain of events that the audience has followed from beginning to end. You know, like a story. Later, we see Mon Mothma talking with another senator just before the vote in the Senate. This is on the law that will allow stormtroopers to be sent to Republic planets. I don't know, the other senator says. With everything that's happening, rebel bombings in Gorman of all places, if I vote for this, they'll peg me as a rebel myself. And the law passes despite Mon's opposition. Over a secure comlink, Cyril asks for an update on the information that he gave Dedra about Cassian and Calcite. But Dedra is unconvincing as she tells him that they're still investigating. Well, what's the plan until then? Cyril asks. Just keep your head down, Dedra says. Transports will arrive to relocate you soon. What do you mean? Cyril asks. There's still work to be done here. There is, Dedra agrees, but the ISB will take care of it from here. And after this exchange, Cyril starts to dig into the manifests of shipments due to arrive on Gorman, and he finds weapons and mining equipment. A lot of both. And of course this drives a wedge even further between Cyril and the Imperials. We actually get to see how he's exposed to information that challenges his beliefs about the Empire. We see Cyril's mum watching television. On it, the Imperials are announcing that Gormans are being offered free transport to Coruscant for any who wish to escape the growing rebel violence. Cut to Cyril, who shows up at Enz's house. "Have you heard what the damn Imperials are saying?" Enza laughs. "Just pack our things and head off world. The gall of them." "I think we should do it," Cyril replies. Enza's confused. "I'm not leaving. This is my home." Cyril says, "The front went too far with the bombing at the naval depot." "We never approved that," Enza replies. "And based on everything I know, we're pretty sure the Imperials did that themselves." "What?" Cyril says. Enza shakes her head. "We don't have the kind of explosives on hand to destroy an entire building." "You're saying that someone else planted those bombs?" Cyril asks. "Yes," she replies. "It doesn't matter," Cyril shakes his head. "The Imperials aren't looking for outside agitators anymore. Unless we leave, they'll treat us all like terrorists." "Let them," Enza fires back. "We aren't going to just bow down to them." She hesitates, then says, "How do you know what the Imperials are looking for?" Cyril ignores her. "I'm telling you, we need to go." He reaches to grab her arm, but she pulls away. "Cyril, listen to me. I'm not leaving." Cyril's eyes are filled with desperation. "You have to trust me on this. I can't lose you." But Cyril's words are settling on Enza now. She's starting to understand just how he might know the Imperial intentions. Her expression becomes hard. "Get out," she says. And with a sigh, Cyril leaves. Cyril heads to one of the departure points and considers boarding a ship. We watch as men and women in Imperial uniforms and non-Gormans board. Cyril steps towards the platform and an attendant calls out to him. She tells him that he has to board quickly as it's about to depart. But Cyril hesitates. Then he turns around and he returns home. In his apartment, he stares at a model spider in one hand, an Imperial model ship in the other. We see a montage of stormtroopers arriving on Gorman and protests in the streets. All the while, we see propaganda playing on Cyril's television, interspersing images of the naval depot bombing and the old woman bystander from the cargo heist. Soon, Dedra arrives on planet. Cyril heads out to confront her, but not before we cut to Cassian being led out to the crest of a hill. Lisa from the Gorman front gestures below them to the mine in the abandoned spider silk hatchery. A long line of trucks are heading inside, coming from a nearby Imperial cargo ship. "They're not even being subtle anymore," Cassian comments. "This is the second ship I've seen unloading today," Lisa replies. "The second?" Cassian cringes, debating whether or not to do what he's about to do. "Message Rylands," he says. "I thought we didn't use comms to HQ on jobs," Lisa replies. Cassian sighs. "Whatever's going to happen, it's going to happen soon. They need to know, now." Lisa tries to hail HQ on the comms, but gets nothing but static. She tries again. Nothing. "I can't get through," she tells Cassian. He looks up at the imposing Star Destroyer in low orbit. "They're jamming the comms," he says. "What does that mean?" Lisa asks. "It means that whatever's about to happen, the Imperials don't want anyone to see it." Cassian pauses to think for a moment. "Did you video those mining trucks?" Cassian asks. "Yes, why?" she replies. "Film them again," Cassian says urgently. "Film everything. Then meet me near the south side port." Cassian hops on a speeder and rushes off towards the city. Cyril shows up at the military outpost in the middle of the city, where Dedra is. After some hostile back and forth with a guard who calls him Gorman scum, Dedra intervenes and gets Cyril inside. "What are you doing here?" Dedra demands, livid, as she pulls him into her private office. "You're supposed to be halfway to Coruscant right now." "What happens to the people who don't board the transports?" Cyril asks. Dedra doesn't answer for a long moment. "Anyone who boards the transports is given free passage to Coruscant." "But what happens to the people who stay?" Cyril demands. Dedra sighs. "You have to get out of here. The Gormans are getting out of control. It's not safe." Cyril grabs Dedra by the throat. "Tell me what you're planning." Dedra steels herself, holding Cyril's gaze even as he grips her throat. "Terrorists will be met with lethal force." Cyril runs. Dedra hurriedly follows him into the hall, considers chasing after him, but an officer calls out to her. "Lieutenant Miro, they need you in the Situation Room." She looks between Cyril and the officer. then turns her back on Cyril. Cassian arrives at the Gorman HQ and tries to scrounge together a team as fast as he can. Half the Gormans are in the street protesting the arrival of the stormtroopers. Caro Rylands is distraught, sitting with a bottle of alcohol. What can we do? The stormtroopers are in our streets. We can't fight that, Caro says. Did I bring this down upon us? Cassian reassures him. The Empire were coming no matter what he did. But at least now they have a chance to do something about it. What is it that we can do? Shine a light on what the Empire is doing here. Get all the information that we've gathered here and get it off-world. We'll show the rest of the galaxy. You want us to just leave all of our people? After today, there won't be much left of your people. What? No, they can't. You think those stormtroopers are here to protect you? They're good at just one thing. Caro refuses to meet Cassian's gaze. Rylands, whatever chance we had here is over, but the rebellion isn't. We need every hand we can, but Gorman is done. But Enza's still out there. Horror paints Caro's eyes. Andrina and Sam. They all need to get to the port. If we can claim any ship there, I can fly us out of here. Then I'm going to find my people. Caro scrambles to his feet and runs out into the city. And Cassian hesitates. He could leave. He knows that if he goes with Caro, there's a good chance that he dies. There's very little likelihood that any of them can get out of there, but he isn't Luthen. He's here to help people. So he follows Caro. In the streets, we see Cyril as he runs into Enza, protesting the arrival of the stormtroopers. Cyril tries to convince Enza to leave one more time, but she's too busy shouting at the Empire. She barely even listens to him. This is where we see the Imperials removing the barriers to the Memorial Plaza and the Gormans heading inside. We cut to Caro desperately trying to convince his countrymen not to go in, but no one listens. They're all just so angry. Cassian grabs Caro's arm. We're getting Enza and leaving. We can't fit this whole city onto one ship. Caro frowns, but then sighs and asks someone in the crowd about Enza. They say she went into the memorial courtyard already. Caro and Cassian share a concerned look. Then Caro rushes inside as Cassian tries and fails to stop him. Back with Cyril, Enza finally hears what he's trying to tell her. They're going to kill you all! She looks where Cyril is pointing. The stormtroopers blocking the entrance to the courtyard. The snipers on the roof. Realization hits her. Back with Cassian, Caro spots Enza and calls out to her, wrestling against the packed crowd to reach her. Then, a shot rings out across the courtyard. Target down, we hear an Imperial sniper say over the radio to Dedra. The crowd parts momentarily and we see the body of an Imperial military security officer. The man's compatriots look at the body, then at the crowd. The massacre begins. Enza and Cyril try to escape, but the plaza is chaos. Blaster fire comes from every direction. They duck behind cover with a group of Gormans fighting the Imperials. Cyril repeats that they have to get out of there, but Enza ignores him, grabbing the blaster from one of her compatriots and firing back at the stormtroopers. Cassian and Caro spot Enza and Cyril across the plaza. Caro shouts and then runs towards Enza. Cassian looks between Caro, running in the open, and the Imperials. But then, Enza is shot. Caro reaches his daughter and finds Cyril cradling her in his arms. She isn't moving. Caro crumbles to his knees and sobs. Tears streak down Cyril's face, but he lets Caro hold his daughter. Cyril stands. He spins to survey the carnage around them. Blaster bolts whiz past his head, but he seems unperturbed, until his gaze finds Cassian. This is your fault, Cyril says. Cassian is running towards cover when Cyril slams into him, screaming. Cassian's weapon flies from his hands as Cyril batters him with all his fury. After all Cyril saw, after witnessing the evils of the Empire firsthand, he still blamed Cassian and the rebels, for in his eyes, despite all the evidence to the contrary, they incited the violence from the Empire. After trading blows, both Cyril and Cassian are covered in blood. Cyril ends up on the pavement next to Cassian's blaster. He grabs it and points it at Cassian. Then, Caro shoots Cyril before he can pull the trigger. Unlike in the show where Cassian left Gorman, in my version, Cassian stayed and fought for the Gormans. He valued their lives more than even the rebellion itself, and so he is saved by them. Only now is Cassian able to convince Caro to leave. They work together with some of the armed Gormans to cut a path through the Imperials and make their way to the port. If you desperately want, you can sandwich in the fight with the K2SO droid here. Maybe have it actually crushed into the ship that they end up hijacking. And so, with Cassian in the cockpit and a group of Gormans consoling Caro, they fly off, headed for Coruscant. The final shot lingers on Lisa, holding tight to the camera Cassian had ordered her to use. They may not have been able to stop the massacre, but they were able to salvage evidence of it. At the start of the next episode, we see Lonnie speaking with an ISB analyst. The man confesses to Lonnie that he had been scanning comms traffic for information on Kelkite at the request of Dedra. He says, "I wasn't sure if I should do it, but with everything Dedra had been working on with Partagaz around Axis and Gorman, I didn't want to get on the wrong side of her or the higher-ups. But the flag caught some messages that, well, they're not just top secret. Comms from Director Krennic are in there. I didn't even know a priority flag could match comms from someone of his rank. If they find out it was me, I don't know what they'll do to me." "If I were you," Lonnie says, "if they asked, I'd claim ignorance." "But who else received the report?" The analyst swallows. "No one. And, well, it gets worse." "How?" "I sent it to her personal datapad." Lonnie gives his best conciliatory smile and rests a hand on the man's shoulder. "Claim ignorance. And, well, pray." Later, we see Lonnie break into Dedra's house and hack her datapad. And wham! He has all that juicy Death Star goss. After this, instead of Mon Mothma giving a rather milquetoast speech about how the propaganda exists and that the Emperor is bad, she gives a brief speech about how a government exists to serve its people. Not to be a career for politicians, or even to shape society into a form its leaders think is best. The measure of a leader is how much they can put themselves aside to serve their people. And how does this Emperor serve his people? And in that moment, the rebels hijack the airways to broadcast actual footage of the Gorman massacre, delivered by Cassian and the Gorman front. As the footage plays, stormtroopers rush to arrest Mon, but she escapes. This version, with Mon able to tangibly pierce a hole in the Imperial propaganda machine, should help her really earn a stand-up and cheer moment. Later, much like in the show, we see Lonnie meeting with Luthen about the Death Star plans. But in my version, Lonnie records his last few conversations to use as leverage against Luthen, just in case the man refuses to get him out of Coruscant. However, Lonnie never mentions this because Luthen claims he'll help. So, after Luthen kills Lonnie, Dedra gets access to his files, and she obtains an incriminating recording of the pair. And it's this recording that tells Dedra that Luthen is Axis. Just before Dedra confronts Luthen, we see protests in the streets of Coruscant about Gorman. And when the pair are facing off in Luthen's shop, after Dedra reveals Lonnie's recording, Luthen can look out his window at the protests below and say, "Did you see Senator Mothma's speech yesterday?" And this can be his last laugh at the Empire's expense, before he cuts himself. And again, now we have an actual causal relationship between the story events and Luthen's discovery. And not only that, we actually get to make a thematic statement about Luthen with it. His willingness to use and burn the people who work with him results in his downfall. By contrast, Cassian's desire to help the people he works with proved his salvation when Caro saved him from Cyril. Finally, I could redraft the falling action of the final 2 episodes as well, but I'd mostly be inventing story from scratch at that point. Though with the changes I've made, at least there's more setup for the conflict that's already there, so it could really be left as is. That said, one change I would definitely make is we either keep Bix heading to the grain planet at the end, or we keep the attempted assault on her. We don't keep both. Now, some people are probably a bit confused that I complained so much and then provided a rewrite that was so similar to the original. But this is just one possible example. My goal here was to show that the problem wasn't that I disliked the writer's decisions about any given plot point, but rather that if they wanted to make those decisions, more work needed to be done to support them. And I only spent so much time on this, so if they wanted, the writers could have done so much more. And of course, it goes without saying, I'm a talentless hack, so if I can do this, they definitely can. So the next time you see someone praising the writing for season 2 of Andor, remember what I said. Nuh-uh. And if you're Tony Gilroy or at Disney and you're looking for a script doctor, you know where to find me. Wait, it won an Emmy? What the fuck?